You now, except for TikTok. You guys are live.
Okay, we need the screen. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Gruber Podcast Power Hour. My name is Claude Dixon.
I'm Lenny Hodges.
Hey, last week we introduced the Did You Know section at the end of the podcast last week. What we're going to do is we're going to do it at the beginning going forward because the power material that we present, it's really dry stuff and you can zone out pretty easily, especially when we get into the technical pieces. So we want to kind of like liven it up in the beginning of the show and go ahead and do the Did You Know. Lenny, why don't you take us out on that? But first, I want to show you a real quick image. Can you guys put up the first image? Aaron, can you put up the first image on the screen there?
Sure, just give me 1 second.
Okay, it's
And
up
there
there.
you go.
It's up there now. You see that, Lenny? Where'd you come up with that, and who are those people?
Well, for us older folk out there, this is Crockett and Tubbs from Miami Vice from the 80s. So I figured it was perfect since we're both a little elder now.
Yeah, I used to watch that show all the time. I love that show.
You know, that the speedboat they had was great. You know,
Yeah.
growing up thinking, hey, I'm gonna own one of those one day.
Yes. All right, so what is the Did You Know question of the day? Go ahead. What is it, Lenny? Come on.
The year the first smartphone actually came out.
Okay. If any of you were paying attention, you probably saw the answer, but we're going to go ahead and wait until you provide us with a response. So the question was?
The original year that the quote-unquote first smartphone came out.
Yeah, the very first smartphone. So take your smartphone out because we're going somewhere with this, and I want you to look at it. And once we get some responses back, we'll address those. But if you look at this next slide right here, we talked last week about the 12 minerals that you can find in a cell phone. And just to give you a little bit more background, there are 5,000 minerals known to man. 5,000. I'm not sure if you were aware of that. Last week we talked about kunzite, which is a mineral found in Afghanistan. And we also talked about beryl. There's 8 different types of beryl. This one in the picture here is a Colombian emerald. And I have one of those here in the front. We actually have these minerals. When we go back to the other screen, you'll be able to see them on the front of the table. You can stay on the yeah, go ahead and stay on this for a bit. And the other 3 minerals that you can find in a smartphone is smithsonite, which is from Pakistan. That's the one here in the middle. And then off to the right, you got wolfenite, which is actually from Arizona. And you have fluorite down at the bottom. It's on the top of Lenny's head there, that purple mineral, fluorite from Nevada. Now, you can find the last 2 that I just mentioned, wolfenite and fluorite. You can find that in different locations throughout the world. Same thing with beryl. One thing I want to say about this Colombian emerald, they're not using this grade of emerald in a cell phone. They're not. That's the most expensive emerald known to man, the Colombian emerald. That thing, you would have to pay $5,000, $6,000 for your cell phone if they were using that particular grade of emerald in your phone. So again, these are 5 out of the 12 minerals that you can find. So let's talk about what part of the cell phone. So if you look back at the kunzite, I mentioned that actually is lithium that goes into the lithium-ion battery in your phone. There's lithium in that mineral. Beryl, which is the emerald, is the phone connector and wire, the green mineral that you see at the bottom left. Smithsonite, which is in the middle, any PCB board that you see, if you open up your cell phone and you see those little tiny PCB boards, they're green, they're using this particular mineral on those boards. Wolfenite is also used for connectors and wires, and then fluorite is used for your actual case. So if you look at your case, take your phone out of your protective case, just look at that surface. There's fluorite, and that's in your phone case, which I think is really, really, really amazing. These minerals are beautiful. Of course, they're used for different things other than cell phones. I mean, they turn them into gemstones, rings, all sorts of things, bracelets, but they're actually fabulous to look at. I actually have all 5 of these on the desk here. So go ahead and go back to the main backdrop screen, and you'll be able to see these on the desk. Yeah, they're right there here in front of me here. You can see the fluorite is a pretty huge specimen. So those of you who are watching the podcast internally, if you want to see these up close and personal, pick them up, see the density differences, that kind of thing, the translucency, feel free to stop by the corner office. I'll have them on my desk in there, and you can take a look at them. All right, you ready to get down to business? Okay, so last week, we talked about our UPS refurbishment process in our depot, and what we focused on was each component from the frame all the way to the static switch, and we talked about each one of them and kind of like the cleaning and inspection process we put each of them through. This week we're going to talk about the actual testing of the UPS. That's the other piece of it, which culminates into a test report that is sent to the account manager that shows everything that we do. So we're going to hit you on the battery cabinet. We're going to spend a little bit of time on that, on what we do there. We're going to talk about the the initial power up and load banking process of the UPS. We're going to go into the burn-in, power quality, and then the thermal imagery of what we do there to make sure that there's no hot spots within the UPS before we send it out. So Lenny, let's go ahead, let me put the slide up first so we can look at the battery cabinet here. And this is an actual project that we worked on this week. It's on the road now. It's on its way to its destination in Florida. But what you're looking at here is a battery cabinet, 2 images, 2 different angles. And one of the first things we do outside of wiring it up is the whole torquing process, the terminals. We make sure that they're properly torqued. And if you look at this torque wrench right here, this is the wrench that we actually use to make sure the batteries are at the correct spec. And there's 40, Lenny, there were 40 batteries on this, right?
40 batteries in it, and the terminals on these is 44.9.
Yeah,
for the specs, right?
Yeah, the torque spec.
But it is 40 batteries, 2 terminals per.
Right. And the reason why that's so important is that you don't want heat. Heat is energy loss across the cells, so making sure that they're torqued to the correct spec is imperative. The other thing there, too, is you see yellow strapping. Vital. Anytime you send batteries out in a unit to be shipped across the road, you got to make sure that they're properly strapped. These batteries are totally snug in there. They're not going to shift. They're not going to move. Anything else you want to mention there?
No, it's just a matter, like you said, is shifting and everything. There's also plates on some of those where there's only 2 batteries in a slot, so there's actually plates to help hold that also along with the straps.
Okay. This one's relatively clean. It was really clean when we came in. Another important thing, too, from a quality standpoint, is the heat shrink on the actual ends of the cable where the lug is. And as you put the lug on the terminal and tighten it down, there should be no copper, no copper wire showing when you do that. That's the whole purpose of having the heat shrink. It covers it up, makes it look really, really, really good from a quality standpoint. All right, we're going to switch gears now and go to the initial power up and boot up process of the UPS. Go ahead and talk to that if you would.
So whenever we have everything hooked up, battery, cabinet, power from the wall or power from the building coming into the unit itself, everything's locked into place. What we'll do is we'll do initial power on, and even with an UPS has MEMS like we discussed before as individual components, which is like the brain of the unit. So it's a boot process similar to what a computer does. Mm-hmm. It boots up, it checks everything. If anything faults in that initial boot process, we'll get an error, we'll get a fault, and then we'll troubleshoot from there. But usually the boot process is just powering it up. It's like turning on your car. You turn on your car, you let it idle, nothing's wrong with it. Same with an UPS. We turn it on, it boots everything, everything's good. And it's running at that time, no issues. But we haven't tested it. It's like putting your car in drive.
Right.
So we haven't tested it at that point.
Yeah, let me point one thing out. Last week, everything we talked about, the UPS, don't show that yet. The UPS was in the de-energized state. Okay?
Right.
Now the UPS is in the energized state where he's talking about powering it up and then going on to the load bank process.
Right. So like I said, it's exactly like turning on your car. We're powering it, making sure everything powers up, everything's functioning at that point initially, and that your MEMS are reading each piece. You know, the MEMS cycles through the unit at about 30 to 45 seconds in 30 to 45 second intervals, and checks each piece of each component. In the UPS, and also, like, for example, if you have a battery cabinet, checking those batteries also.
Right, and when Lenny's talking about there, just to put it in layman's term, we showed you the MEMS. They were at the top of the frame. Remember, they slide in and out. That is the actual brain of the UPS. That's where all the thinking takes place. I think last week I used the human body. That's this thing right here inside of your cranium that's doing all the thinking and monitoring of the UPS. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, and that's basically what we do initially is just let it run, let it heat up too, because components can fail due to heat. So we'll let it run for an hour or so, half an hour, just to get everything warmed up, and then because you can't have a failure before you put any load on it, before you stress the unit out, you know, just by heat itself. You know, heat can heat up a component that's just sitting there, and all of a sudden it fails. So we do, you know, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour just sitting there, idle.
So no load.
No load at the time. We just let it idle just to see if there's anything, you know, as far as components going to fail just in that initial time frame.
Okay.
So after it's completed the boot process.
Okay, so you got an hour there of the UPS just being on in the depot.
Right. Not any stress to it, not load, anything like that, just idle.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we turn on the load bank.
Then we turn on the load bank.
So what's the MOP there? MOP, method of procedure there.
So what we'll do is the UPS provides power out to whatever equipment you're powering, you know, computers, whatever you got hooked up to provide power. So the output power comes out. We have a machine where we simulate equipment. So we'll hook up the output power to what we call a load bank. And then what we'll do is we'll turn that on and we'll stress it, you know, 30, 40, 50% load. And then we'll run that for 3 to 4 hours.
Right. And the 30, 40, 50% that Lenny is referencing is the capacity. So it's 30% of the capacity, or the kVA, the rated kVA of the unit. Okay. We're testing it at different levels, different stresses, to see if it will carry the load at that level. So, like, how long do you run the load test at 10%, 20%, 40%, or what have you?
Initially, I'll start out about 30%, and I'll run that about 10 minutes. Because if anything is going to hiccup, it's going to hiccup in that first few minutes. So after about 10 minutes, I'm okay, let's go. You know, and then we'll increase it another 10%, and then usually I'll max it out at about 60%, give or take, because each system varies, you know, based on what it's pulling in and out as far as the amperage. So at about 60%, once we get about 60%, after, you know, half an hour or so, we'll let that run about 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours. And that kind of gives us a good feel of anything that's going to fail within that time frame.
Are you doing any changes between bypass, running on battery, any of that type of stuff?
What we'll do is initially I'll let it, because, like, for example, certain units, when you power it up, the initial battery is 80%. And it just takes a while just to get 100%. Some units you can get 100% within 10 minutes, you know, depending on which unit we're working with. So, like, for example, PX, you power it on, and the initial battery charge, even if those are 100%, as soon as you power it off, power it back on, it's flat lines and it baselines at 80%. And then it takes about 6 to 8 minutes for every percent to get to 100. So, you know, you look at 6 to 7 hours just to get, you know, back to 100. So what we do is I'll let it run until we get to a certain percentage for the battery charge, and then that's when I'll take off building power and put it into bypass, or, you know, I'll put it into bypass and then see how it does, and also run it on battery alone to see how it does. You know,
question for you there. How long are you allowing it to run on battery?
Oh, on battery, I'll actually run it till it gets down to about 30% battery charge.
Okay.
And then what happens at that point? We'll put it back onto power and then see if the battery's charged back up, because you want to make sure you got that charging function.
Right.
Also, so I'll let it get down to about 30%.
Okay. And then prior to shipment, you're going to let the batteries charge back
We
up?
charge as much as we possibly can. Right.
Okay. What's typical though? 80?
Well, it all depends. On a PX, we'll probably get it around 90. With an LX or whatever, some of the smaller units, they'll be at 100.
Okay.
When we palletize it and everything. So with the PX, like I said, it takes a little bit longer. So we're, probably looking at 90% or so once we're done, and then it goes from there.
Okay. So from the initial boot all the way through the load testing, okay, at varying levels of load, how long of a time period are we talking about? And I know it could be variable, but just on average.
On average, it's 4 to 5 hours.
Okay, so you guys got that. So that's one phase right there. Just the burn-in and the load banking process is 4 to 5 hours. Okay, that's one. So we're going to go ahead and go to the next thing that we do. It's called the power quality analysis. And I have a $7,000 meter here right in front of me. This is what we call the PQ meter. It's the Fluke 435. It's the meter that we use out there to analyze power quality. There's also, you can go ahead and put that picture up now, Aaron. This is what this thing delivers in terms of a picture. What you're looking at there is a waveform. And what we're trying to do there, I'll let Lenny talk through the specifics, but basically what we're doing is we're analyzing the power, the output power going to the devices downstream that you are trying to support the critical load. And we're looking at whether or not there's fluctuations, deviations, sags, spikes, that kind of thing. Theoretically, what you want to see is a smooth sine wave, because if you don't have that coming out of the output, then the UPS isn't doing what it should be doing in terms of cleaning it up to allow it to go to your devices downstream. You don't want any erratic power going to your devices downstream. It'll shut them down and they won't run properly. So what are we looking at here on this picture here, Lenny?
Well, this is from the unit we actually sent out this week. The battery, you saw the battery cabinet from it earlier. This is actually looking at the 3 phases of power going out, not coming in. Because we have 480 volts coming in, but 120 going out to support whatever equipment you got. So what you're looking at is at the different phases. You're looking at the voltage for each phase, L1, L2, L3, or ABC. It all depends on what technical terms you want to use.
All right, let me stop you right there, because this is where we're kind of getting technical.
Right.
So the other piece that's missing from this meter, there's 4 clamps that are missing that I didn't bring with me. All 4 clamps, you put one around each conductor. Okay, and you heard Lenny talk about phase A, B, and C. So there's a clamp that's going around the conductor for each one, including the neutral, and that's where the power is being monitored through that clamp that's feeding this meter. And you see the sine wave on the screen. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, that's exact. I mean, it actually with the clamps we're actually doing amperage, and then there's another alligator clip that actually will clip on to the terminals for the voltage, and then the clamps that you're talking about actually does the amperage coming out from the unit, the out amperage and everything. So we can measure both at the same time, the voltage, the amperage, and then also the phase rotation. Based on how the power is circulating through from A to C or C to A, depending on how you have the clamps hooked or the alligator clips hooked up to the terminals, you can actually do your rotation, look at it both ways.
So I don't need a separate meter for that?
No, you can.
Even though we have one.
There are separate meters for that, but this is an all-in-one inclusive. It does the amperage, phase rotation, and your voltages.
Okay, so let's talk about the time period. So from start to finish, I know we're probably doing this simultaneously out in the depot. You probably already have this hooked up when you're doing a load test, correct? This
We
is
do
already-
it with
Yeah,
the load test. So
exactly.
we'll hook it up and we'll monitor it every so often. Because I'm not going to sit there for 3 hours looking at a screen.
Right.
So no, every 30 minutes, 45 minutes, go over, take a look at. Okay, we're still good right now.
Right.
Because you can take snapshots, store the stuff into memory, download it, put it on a report as you need it.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that the audience is clear that this is an analysis that we're doing simultaneously with the load testing and the load baking, because I told you it takes 4 to 5 hours on average. So we're running this thing 4 to 5 hours too, and we're monitoring it. And like Lenny said, there's images that can be printed, and they ultimately some of them end up in the test report at the end, which is big. Hey, we've got some questions here. Let's see. YouTube, Google says the first mobile phone was 1973 and the first smartphone in 2007. Apple created the first smartphone. What year did you have?
Actually, technically the first smartphone came out, was invented in 1992, and then it was released to the public in 1994. It was produced by IBM. It was actually a touch screen that you could send emails, send text, and everything through a touch screen. That was considered the first one. $900, which is comparable to what we spend today, but it was a lot bigger back then too. But it actually has a touch screen, and they were able to send emails, text, everything that not every app type thing that we have now, but that was considered the first smartphone. But a lot of people think Apple in 2007 because it kick-started the revolution of cellular phones at that point. Because the Droid or Android didn't come out till 2008.
Okay. So back on real quick power quality. We're talking specific to the UPS itself, but you can use this meter. This is a service or offering that our account managers can sell. You can sell this to a customer. It just doesn't monitor UPSs. You can use it on cooling equipment. Your entire apparatus in the field, from the ATS, your air conditioning equipment, your generator, your UPS, your battery system, you can basically use it for the entire application. So we do sell this service. So switching gears again, there's another item that we do in the depot. It's called thermography. And I have this thermal imaging camera. This is a $4,000 device. Can you hold it for a second? I need to put that slide up right there. This is a $4,000 device, and basically it takes thermal images of the UPS, and it's looking for heat anomalies. So this is another test or analysis that we do on the UPS while it's running in various stages. It could be just running in the beginning with no load on it, or we can put load on it and then take pictures. And what are we looking at here, Lenny?
What you're looking at is an LX, an APC LX. And so on the left side, our left, I'm not sure about the viewer, is the power modules. And then on the right side are the batteries, which is actually where you're having thermal runaway with the batteries at this point. If you notice, the dead center of the 4 batteries is where you have that thermal runaway, where it's darker color. The lighter the color, the cooler it is. The darker the color, as far as like red, orange, or anything like that, is where you're going to have your hot spots.
Yeah, so it looks like you have 2 modules on the right there that are in thermal runaway, and then that one right there in the center is heating up and on its way to thermal runaway. Now with batteries, the spec is 77 plus or minus 5 degrees. That's theoretically what you should be keeping your batteries at, but these batteries are way, way beyond that. Fortunately, these modules are self-contained, so I really don't see a fire issue, but what we do see is swelling, where the batteries will swell up inside of that module, and to get them out of there, it takes almost an act of God to pry those things out of there. I've seen them so big where you have to use a pry bar to break them up to get them out of the module. No one wants to see that, but that's one of the beauties of this camera, where you can see this. You can actually see it before it actually happens and then take corrective action. This is another service or offering that we sell out in the field, is just taking thermal imaging pictures, not just of the UPS. You can take it of circuit breaker panels, for one, air conditioning equipment, anywhere where there's energy going through a machine. This camera is very, very, very valuable. Preventative maintenance is the biggest thing. Eric Pettengill, one of our field engineers, he's the one that took these pictures. I asked him to send me some because he's phenomenal at this in the field. He uses this as a preventative maintenance tool out in the field, and it's really been advantageous to customers when they're able to see, hey, guess what? This event is getting ready to occur. Now we can plan for an outage versus it just happening. The UPS goes down, the system's down, their servers are down, and it just causes a lot more problems versus being able to plan maintenance.
Yeah, you talk about the circuit breaker. We have not the next picture, but the picture after. This is a power distribution unit, but the third thermal, that's actually a circuit breaker panel there, and you can see it's isolated into one area. Normally you don't get thermal or heat involved with the circuit breaker like this, but it does happen, and so you can see it isolated to one area right there. Instead, so you can, like you said, plan ahead, because this is not everybody thinks about, hey, a circuit breaker gets hot. Usually nobody thinks like that. You think, okay, just the equipment, just the batteries, but anything tied to your energy sources or anything is going to produce heat.
Look at this scenario here. Look at this.
Yeah.
You see that? The range 80 to 169. This is running at like 245. That's like extremely hot.
Right.
Yeah, right in here. Right in that area. So I think you can get and see the value of this tool. Helps us in the depot before we send a refurbished unit out. We see something like this. Obviously, this is an automatic replacement of the part. I'm not going to send it out like that, running hot like that, because that's just an event waiting to happen. So you have that. So the burn-in, the load bank, the power quality analysis, and now the thermography. 3 things there. And then lastly, we have cosmetics. What's up with the cosmetics?
We get units, like I said, we get scrapped units, used unit. We get units that are refurbished, that have been refurbished before from maybe another company or something like that. Or so what happens is if we get dented or scratched or whatever, we'll hammer out the dents, we'll straighten what we can, and then we'll paint as necessary to make everything look close to factory standards. Obviously nothing's ever going to be OEM, but we tried our best to make it as close as possible.
Like new.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we shoot for. Like new.
So this is just, standard photos that we take of a unit before it goes out the door. I take a picture of all 4 sides saying, hey, this is what it looked like when it left my facility. That way if there's any questions to what happened during shipment or anything, or unloading or whatever, installation, we can always refer back to it. And everything. Yeah,
that's a really good point that he just mentioned. Throughout the entire process, there's pictures being taken. The technician is taking pictures, which leads us to the test report at the end, and you'll see some pictures that were taken here. Where do these pictures come from, Lenny?
This is actually a snapshot. What we do is we'll put the unit onto our network, and then I will read directly from the machine what voltages are coming in and out, what amperage is coming out, your wattage, all your battery information, all your MEM information about the networks that it's on, or anything that is communicating from the MEM, because you can actually remote control because of the network capabilities, you can actually interface with the machine from a different location via an IP address. So this is a GUI interface from the internet that you can just monitor your unit, or you can make changes to your unit, what you need as far as configuration. But what I do is these are all your snapshot overview measurements, and I'll pull each one and then put it into the report along with all the other information, and this is available for our account manager. So if there's any question of, well, this is what they're seeing at the site during installation, I can always pull a report, but this is what we had, before it got shipped.
Right, in addition to all the photographs.
In addition to all the photographs and everything else, right?
Yeah. Very important there. And then the last thing that we attach to the UPS or system that we ship out is the welcome packet. And inside of the welcome packet, I'll show you the cover page real quick. That's the cover page right there with our 1-800 number on it. And what that contains are our points of contact in case you have a question, our 1-800 technical assistance line, our warranty information. If the UPS has a warranty, it could be 90 days or a year, depending on what the account manager sold. The electrical drawings for the UPS, and then the service contract detail, if there is one on the unit. Typically, we do put a service maintenance agreement on each unit that we ship out, unless it's a rental. That follows a different type process. Okay, let's see what questions we have. Not BlackBerry. Nextel wasn't considered a smartphone. 1997. That's from Grant Mobile. I had a drone with a swelled battery. I had to throw it away. Did you throw away the drone or the battery? Didn't define it there. Okay. That looks like that's all the questions. So you have anything else, Lenny, to wrap it up?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Well, we hope you got something out of that. We look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.